Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier. Joined as always by my co-host Nick Filato. And today we're making a little bit of a transition. We've done some bunch of player profiles recently and more coming. Two that we already have recorded. A big one is on the way soon, probably this week. It's JJ McCarthy. That's coming this week. A few things to finalize there. And then we had some great interviews, I thought, Nick, with Matt Waldman, the RSP, the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. That is some really, really good, intense X's and O's film stuff. I mean, he comes to his own conclusions 100% of the time. This dude's grinding film for 12, 16-hour days. And I love that he has his own formula for coming up with his rankings and evaluations of prospects. And obviously John Schmelk, who gave us a lot of insight, I thought, Nick, into the current roster for the Giants, in addition to, how he sees this draft class and, thoughts on 30,000 foot view stuff. Like, is it worth trading up for quarterbacks? Is it trading back or back in the round one? And so today, Nick, we're going to transition a little bit here. We're going to discuss players who have been connected to the Giants. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there's two ways that you can be connected to the Giants. The first one is by a top 30 private visit. Now, what do we know, Nick? We know that over the course of Joe Shane's tenure with the Giants as general manager, these top 30 visits that they hold with these prospects have been very, very telling as far as who they go on to end up drafting. They've drafted two top 30 visits a year, I think it was, at least, Nick, maybe three on average. One of the years was three. We will land, we'll get the list at some point for the full top 30 visits, and the Giants will probably be drafting two of those players. So I think when we're linked up to these types of players, they're worth exploring. So the first player is
It's even more than that, I believe, because
Okay.
last year you
Yep.
had John Michael Schmitz, you had Jalen
Right.
Hyatt, you had Trey Hawkins, you had Deontay Banks.
Thanks.
And in the first year, it's a little bit cheap
four.
because the Giants had two picks in the top 10, so they knew who likely who was going to be their selection. So
Still.
Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal were both on that list.
6.
And then there was Cordell Flott.
7. So 7 in the first 2 years. They're averaging 3.5 of these per year, and there's going to be 30 in the end.
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain if they had Wan'Dale Robinson in for a top 30.
Okay.
I'm not 100% certain about that. So it could be.
I was being
but
conservative.
Your point remains. Your point remains that
it's even stronger with your evaluation.
Yeah.
I mean, we're averaging 3.5 guys a year. When we get that 30 list, we're going to have to look at it right before draft night and take a look at some of those guys, Nick, and it's going to be very interesting to see. But today we're going to talk about one guy who has had him in for a top 30 visit and another guy who, one of the most veteran, in my mind, NFL draft reporters in the history of the game. We'll get to him soon, Aaron Wilson. This guy's basically this guy's a tried and true old school reporter. Reported heavy interest for the Giants for this player. So I think that's as good as it gets as far as whether it's true and whether it's just smoke. And we'll talk about other things with smoke as we get close to the draft. But one thing you can't deny is smoke is that the Giants had Penn State edge rusher Chop Robinson in for a top 30 private visit. So again, we're talking about the 30 visits, what they're worth. So, Nick, I know you had a chance to evaluate Chop Robinson on tape. I also had a chance to watch him and look into some of what he is and what he can be at the NFL level. Now, let me preface this by saying, Nick, obviously anyone who knows me knows I watch a lot of Big Ten football every Saturday, every weekend of every year. I've seen probably, and because some of my best friends are Penn State fans, I've seen probably 6, 7, 8 games of Chop Robinson broadcast angle. Haven't always focused on him, but he has jumped off the screen a lot of times, and he has his supporters in the Penn State community. So I want to start by saying that, and then I went into my evaluation. But let's take a look at this, what you're showing here first, Nick, with a little mock draftable chart, and then we'll get into some other things. I actually have some stuff I want to present later as well, but you can start by talking about this and then maybe some of what you took away from film.
None of this is a surprise if you watch Chop Robinson's tape. His 10-yard split.
Wait, tell everyone what you're talking about, just because for the listeners as well as the YouTube audience. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm about to get into that. So
Okay,
I have his mock draftable chart up right now, which has all of his measurements and his testing from the 2024 NFL Scouting Combine. And it's basically compared through every NFL Scouting Combine performance from the edge position dating back to 1998, I believe, is when mock draftable started collecting their data. So the higher the percentile, the better it is. Chop Robinson has a 97th percentile 10-yard split, meaning that his suddenness and his quickness is in the 99th percentile of all edge rushers that ever tested at the combine. That translates on the tape because he is one of the more sudden and quick first step edge rushers I've ever watched, really, and covered. And then his 40-yard dash was a 4.48. That's 97th percentile as well. Broad jump, 128 inches, 95th percentile. 20-yard shuttle, 4.25, 84th percentile. All excellent. But 76 and 1/4 wingspan. That's 5th percentile, and 32.5-inch arms. That's 12th percentile for edge rushers. Now, he is going to be utilized by the team that drafts him in a different manner than most edge rushers, which would, I mean, obviously the arm length and the wingspan, it's always going to be a thing, but this isn't the type of player that you're going to rely on consistently to set the edge aggressively and be like a Myles Garrett type of run defender.
Sure.
This is the type of guy that you're going to say, pin your ears back, scream off the edge, use your quickness to slant, use the wide 9 angled rushing angles to get pressure from the high side. That's what he did all throughout Penn State, right? Whose defense does that sound like, Dan?
Sounds a lot like what Shane Bowen wants to do with the Giants.
Sounds a lot like what Shane Bowen wants to do with the Giants. He wants to align guys 3rd and 6 plus, wide 9 angles, and that's just gonna soften the angle for the pass rusher, and it's gonna create really just havoc for the offensive tackle who has to figure out exactly what Chop Robinson is going to do. Now, a lot of the times Robinson, his effective rushes were to the high side, meaning he was trying to win through the outside shoulder. I saw a little bit of speed to power. I saw some bull rush in him just because he keeps his hips so low. He explodes low to high into contact so very well. Didn't necessarily have a pass rush plan. Like if the tackle matched Chop Robinson's first move, I didn't necessarily say, okay, I'll hit you with an inside counter too often. Like he didn't have that diverse plan that I want from my pass rusher. But when he did gain a step, which he often did against offensive tackles, up the pass rushing arc, he used his hands effectively and employed his hands well to maximize the leverage that he established from his suddenness off the line of scrimmage. So I really think he's a dangerous player, but I think he's a little bit, what's the best word? I think I don't want to say he's a one speed type of player, like he's only going to offer you one thing, but I have concerns about his ability to consistently defend the run. And I think he'll best be served in a situation where the defense has him as a closer just to leverage his unique talent as an explosive pass rusher. But I don't know if this is somebody that you want consistently playing 3 downs for, at least not right now. He's only 21 years old. Maybe he can grow into it, but that lack of length could really hurt him if you're going to ask him to stack and read what the offense is doing. Now, if you need him to slant and stuff, yes, he can do that. He can be a one-gap penetrator, but sometimes you need a guy to set the edge firmly, and you don't want many liabilities out there in that regard. And I just have some concerns that Chop Robinson could be that if he's asked to do that by his defensive coordinator.
I have major concerns about that, Nick, as far as what type of player you're getting and what kind of pick is worth investing in a player that may never, in my mind, be able to play the run the way you want him to play the run. At 6'2 and 1/8, 254 pounds with that kind of wingspan and that kind of bad arm length, you look at the tape and you can leave that back up for a second, unless you want to get to here. You look at the tape and he is overwhelmed at times in the run game, I feel like, especially against power gap and especially when he is faced with a double team. I think the good moments I see from him against the run, Nick, are when he's doing exactly what you said a few minutes ago, just shooting the gap for a tackle for loss. Like, that's cool. That's great. It looks good on tape when it happens. But in the NFL, there's not that many opportunities for it. And either way, what am I getting? Like, if I'm using a top 20 pick or a top 15 pick, I need my dude to be on the field setting the edge consistently in the run game. Otherwise, what am I getting out of this? Now, as far as the projection goes as a pass rusher, you talked about what you see, and it's obvious. To me, the best part about Chop Robinson is his get-off, his explosion off the line of scrimmage. But one thing that kind of struck me as weird, I brought this up to you before the pod, is I do feel like a lot of times he wins so quick with that explosion off the line, right off the jump, off the line of scrimmage, but like doesn't have maybe it's the stride length or whatever. I saw someone term it as stride length. I don't know if that's what you would term it as, Nick, and I defer to like the scouts types like you for this type of stuff. But whatever it is, like I feel like he wins immediately with that burst and then loses ground throughout the rep that he shouldn't lose. He should already be with that burst and immediate get off he had. He should be up the arc already and around that defender like a Von Miller type. Like, to me, when you have the measurables that he has, and let's just put this in some kind of I'll put this in context here. He had the fastest 40-yard dash for any edge ever, the fastest 10-yard split for any edge that was 250 pounds or bigger. I mean, that's the burst right there. That's the quick explosion. And then the longest broad jump for any edge ever, which also is a test that shows your explosion. To go with all that, an 84th percentile 20-yard shuttle kind of show change of direction. I mean, this is like an all-world athlete from when it comes to that ability to win up the arc. This is exactly what you...
he definitely didn't have the fastest 40 time of any edge ever,
Oh,
though.
that's what somebody said. Maybe
That's
that's
not
wrong.
right. I mean, just
No, it's
last year,
fastest of any edge over 250 is what it says.
okay,
Maybe
what
that's wrong.
was Nolan Smith like? I think he was like
I
239,
think he
right?
might have been 239. Nolan Smith.
Gotcha.
Yeah, fastest for over 250. Sorry, I
Gotcha.
said that wrong. Fastest for any edge over 250. So, and on all the other things, I'm almost positive are true, which is the fastest 10-yard split for any edge over 250, which is obviously an elite 10-yard split, and then the broad jump, which is explosion. Like this is from an athletic standpoint, and even when you see his burst off the line of scrimmage, this should be to me the next Von Miller, but it's not when I watch him. Like I remember watching Von Miller, and he was so good out of college. Shout out to Evan Rubin, who's one of my best friends from college, who's a diehard Broncos fan. He asked me that draft, who should the Broncos take? I said Von Miller 100% of the time. That was one of my favorite first prospects, and it just wasn't to me like watching Von Miller. And I feel like if you're this build and you have that kind of explosive testing and the get off that he does have on film, there should be just easy wins around the line of scrimmage that aren't there always for him. I think one big red flag for me, I brought this up to you before the pod is, and shout out to whoever put this on Twitter, but someone put a Twitter breakdown of his entire game against Ohio State from 2022. Why is that important to me? Well, Ohio State had 2 NFL tackles in that game. Paris Johnson, a first-round pick, and DeJuan Jones, who somehow was a fourth-round pick, even though I mocked him in my final mock on this podcast as a first-round pick. Didn't understand why he was falling in the draft. Maybe it was some medical BS off the field. He had an unbelievable first season with Cleveland. Already is somebody the Giants could immediately use. But those two guys dominated him in that game. It was one of the most ugly game tapes you'll see for a top first-round type prospect. He lost every rep to those two, and he lost them bad in the pass game to DeJuan Jones. A few he had against Paris Johnson, Nick, but mostly against DeJuan Jones, who, again, is a starting NFL tackle and had a really good rookie year, but still, that's the level of competition you're going to face in the NFL. You're not facing Minnesota's left tackle, whoever the F that is, right? So I don't know. For me, Nick, I loved him when I watched him on broadcast throughout my years following Big Ten, but I don't know. When I study him a little more and look into what he should be and what he is right now, when you also factor in the run game, things you're lacking, I don't know where would you rank? Because here's the thing. Daniel Jeremiah put him as his 21st overall prospect on his big board. Is that a range you would put him in on your type of big board? Like, is that just knowing what this type of prospect is?
Probably not. I'd probably have him a little bit lower,
Okay.
but I understand if a team wants to select him in the first round.
For
If
the
a team
upside,
wants
right?
that, well, not just the upside. I do think he has a very high ceiling. But if you pair him, say if Shane Bowen was on a team that was actually like good and had a functional roster around it and a sound defense with edge setting defensive line, and you want to bring this guy in to be that. I don't want to devalue him and say, oh, he's only a pass rushing specialist. I think he can be a run defender, just not one that's always consistently being that primary contained defender. But if you run a system that slants and twists and gap exchanges a lot, he's excellent at that. He gets so low to the ground. He gets so narrow through these little crevices, right? He fits himself into these little crevices very well, and he uses his hands in an active manner.
He's got pretty good pop, I feel like in those run plays. He's one-on-one.
He's probably stronger than I thought after I saw him against the run game getting kind of like thrown to the ground. I'm like, this guy doesn't really have that good of play strength. But if you see him when his momentum is going, he drives through offensive tackle, and you could see that there is force behind him. He is not just this quick finesse guy. There is some power to his pass rushing repertoire, and he has a very high motor as well. I can give my synopsis if you want. And I also just want to talk about, like, he is one of the better edge rushers I've seen in college at the top of the arc, reducing the surface area of his chest. Do you remember last year when we talked about Kayvon Thibodeau against the New York Jets, against Mekhi Becton, and how good he was with his inside? This is getting into the weeds a little bit. How good he is with his inside foot when he is going into his first step cornering. So he's already like 2 steps into his rush. He's going into that third step, and he takes that inside foot and he places it almost to the outside portion of his outside foot while he is dipping at the knees, the ankles, putting a lot of stress on that ankle joint and the hips, and basically bringing his inside shoulder in front of his chest. So that tackle has nowhere clean to punch. Remember, Mekhi Becton was trying to make contact, and he would miss, and then Mekhi Becton would have his inside arm, and he would try to get it on like the small of the back to control, but Kayvon Thibodeau kept dipping underneath that. Chop Robinson is so good at that area. And I know it's very specific.
Great observation.
But how he is able to take that inside foot, put it in front of that outside foot while putting so much damn stress on that outside foot joint of his ankle while bending through the contact. It's beautiful, really. Like, I love seeing stuff like that. I still have so many reservations though about his ability to counter. And NFL tackles, if you only have like one one true punch, right? Like if you
Sure.
only have that one like uppercut, you can defend against that uppercut. You need to develop a hook. You need to develop a good cross. You need to develop
And
some really
let's be
sturdy jab.
honest, Nick, I think we've seen at times Kayvon Thibodeau himself struggle with this
Yeah,
idea,
yeah.
what
Mhm.
you're bringing up right now. Yeah,
But in my opinion, man, and this is no knock on Kayvon, I think Kayvon is a more
sure.
complete player than Chop Robinson. Chop Robinson is much better at the things I just described
Better
than Kayvon
pass
Thibodeau
rusher,
was
yes.
going out,
Better
coming
get
out.
off.
Much better.
Kayvon's
And
best trait is his get off.
better get off, more explosive and bendier than Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yep.
A lot bendier than Kayvon.
No, I don't think he's as bendy as he should be. That's kind of my thing. I guess that's
Okay.
where I'm at with the Von Miller whole thing.
I
Like,
think I
this
think I
prospect to me should be a little bendier.
see. I think I disagree with that. Now he's not Von Miller. Von Miller is probably the bendiest player I've ever seen, especially when you combine like the bendiness with the power.
Yeah, not including like the Nick Bonito types. Yeah.
Yeah. Nick Bonito, he was somebody that came to my mind when I was watching Chop Robinson.
I did same.
Yeah, okay, it's sweet. Chop Robinson, we saw him there on the mock draftable too, and I was like, that's you can see the skill set, but Chop Robinson to me has a little bit more pop than Benito does. I think Chop Robinson offers a little bit more. I just think in the right system he could thrive. In the wrong system, he could be a complete and utter bust. But he's still somebody. I don't want to say complete and utter bust though, because I
don't want
still
to say bust. Yeah.
Because on third down, he's going to have value.
Right.
In passing situations, he's going to find value, right? And you can employ him in a manner to which the offense is going to like be like, dude, we might need to like slide running back to his side if we have a poor tackle in there. And if the New York Giants know anything, there's some poor tackle play around the NFL. You put Chop Robinson in a wide stance and send him, and then put like a 4-eye shade against the tackle who we also with a linebacker stack behind him, and you have a 3-on-2 to that side. It's going to dictate to the offense that they might need to slide protection over there to protect that tackle from Chop Robinson and a potential blitz from the stack linebacker. So it just gives the defense more tools to work with. And I always will appreciate that. I just don't know if, like, from the Giants standpoint, after trading for Brian Burns, if drafting Chop Robinson with the state of their roster right now in the first round is an ideal situation. Now, the Giants could be looking at Chop Robinson with a 5th percentile wingspan, a 12th percentile arm length, and some of the concerns that we have against the run as a possible player who falls in the draft. And then they could maybe trade up in the second round and get him. And now you have a pass rushing duo with Brian Burns, Chop Robinson, and then Kayvon Thibodeau, who would be the starter, but Chop Robinson, Brian Burns as wide 9 high side rushers, which would be the most dynamic high side rushers in the league with those two, just off of pure explosiveness and bend. Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence. And that would be your pass rushing package. And that would be a crazy fun pass rushing package to cover.
Yeah, and let me say this, because I have this written in my notes. It's something that I just saw multiple times. I think he also has some versatility to his game, Chop Robinson. That's something I said I liked about his game. There were multiple times where I saw him line up as kind of like a 3-tech or a stand-up 3-tech and just kind of shoot the gap there. Because, I mean, this kind of goes into, like, he has good inside. If you put him on the inside, he has enough explosion that he's good at creating that first step, boom, night through a little gap. And I think that Bowen would use him in that way. It wouldn't just be as the wide 9, though obviously, that's where you want to use him. And I have in my notes that I saw some reps where he was like dropping back into coverage, which you got to love, because Shane Bowen, we don't love this from our edges. And Wink did it, but every NFL coordinator is doing it these days, including Shane Bowen.
Well, Shane Bowen was one of the, I don't want to say he was one of the first ones, but Dick LeBeau was doing that back with Pittsburgh. And then Dick LeBeau was in Tennessee the year before Shane Bowen arrived. And I'm not certain if Dick LeBeau kind of had like a Jim Schwartz on steroids type of role with the Titans after he left. But you saw Shane Bowen adopt a system that had a bunch of Schwartz in it with the wide 9, and then a bunch of Dick LeBeau with the simulated pressures.
Right.
And the simulated pressures, again, for those who are new to the podcast, is when you send 4, but one of those rushers is a non-traditional rusher. So in order to effectively do that, you're going to drop an edge off the line of scrimmage and then send another player, a defensive back, a linebacker, and then the goal is to catch the offense off guard and possibly create a free rusher. Yes. Chop Robinson and Kayvon Thibodeau are both fluid enough edge rushers, and Brian Burns. But Brian Burns, you want all 3 of those guys, and Azeez Ojulari to some degree. They're all fluid enough to operate in space and be functional in these shallow zones. So I see the appeal from a Shane Bowen standpoint, and it goes beyond just it's scheme specific. Shane Bowen can only be here a year, like. Any team wants somebody who can be a closer, who can win to the high side, who can offer a defense a lot of different options. And I think Chop Robinson gives that defense those options.
And I don't want to discount him from what I'm kind of saying here, Nick, because
I know,
I
I know.
think no, I know you know that, but I feel like I may have come out harsh with some of the negatives, but I feel like I want to get into some more positives about his game because it's really important to note that it's not just that he can be a closer. His ceiling to me is still one of the best pass rushers in the NFL because he's only 21 years old. Like he can get better, like you said, all the things that he can work on, developing a counter move, having more of a pass rush repertoire, that could happen, right? And you know what won't go away? His burst. His bending, and I don't love his bending, but his burst, his ability to change directions, which I do think is good. I know. I think he's bendy, just not. I guess maybe it's like a smoothness that I'm looking for around the edge that I don't fully see with him.
So bendy is. I don't want to.
Maybe those are two different things.
I don't want to say it's. Yeah, I don't want to say it's ambiguous, but like his ability to basically at his hips, right? Like focus on his hips. His ability to turn his body and just like sink away and kind of like take his upper torso and remove it from the frame of his hips and where the rest of his body is one of the better, like I said earlier in the podcast, it's one of the best I've seen from an edge rusher coming out of college. And that's just so difficult for offensive tackles to line up and to frame. Yeah. It's like, where am I going to punch? Because once I punch, and if I miss, this dude has the leverage. This dude has the low hips. This dude is explosive. This dude can put a lot of the this is what I mean by flexibility, man. He could put a lot of the stress on that ankle joint and then just bend underneath, get his hips oriented into the pocket. And then that closing burst is just rare too. Fire right into the pocket. Like it's very dangerous for offensive tackles to time that kind of player up in those pass rushing situations.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I think just based on your explanation, I figured out exactly where I'm at and where maybe not disconnect, but what I'm thinking of two different things. I agree with you exactly on what you just broke down. I think for me, when I meant not bendy was not the right word I was using. I guess the smoothness. I just feel like sometimes he just doesn't look as smooth as he should look when he's rushing that up that arc. Like maybe it's the choppiness of his legs or the short stride length, whatever we were talking about before, but it just doesn't look as smooth as I want it to be, despite having the ability to bend at his hip and have that same bendiness to him. So it's interesting, but regardless, as you just broke down, he does have the bendiness of, as far as we're terming it like that, which gives him that upside. And some of his best snaps, in my opinion, came when he was a 20-year-old prospect, which is a really good sign. You have the rep against Auburn, or was it Auburn from 2 years ago?
He was crazy against Auburn,
just destroyed that game. And then he had that sack fumble. It was crazy burst off the line of scrimmage. So you talk about the bad game against Ohio State, but you got other great reps as a 20-year-old. And the production overall, by the way, Nick, is phenomenal. That's another thing. I mean, not sacks. If you're counting sacks are not, if sacks are what you deem to be production, then yes, the production isn't great. But if you look at other things for production, the things that actually matter and have telling time over time, well, he was a 92.3 pass rush grade from Pro Football Focus, 93.1 on true pass rush sets, Nick. That was the fourth best of any player in college football. Yeah, only 11.5 sacks, but a 20.9 pass rush win rate, according to Pro Football Focus. Also one of the best. Then you look into some other deeper stuff, and maybe I can share this now on the screen. Maybe we can blow it up, present. Let's see if I can do this. This is great radio right now as I try to get this going. But let's see if I can present this right now. Can you see this right now? And yeah, Nick, if you look at some of just the true analytic side of this is a chart that shows notable edge prospects pass rush win rates with true pass set win rates on the left column and overall pass rush win rate on the right column. We've got Nick Bosa, one of the best in the NFL, Joey Bosa, another great player, Latu up here. Look who's up there with Chase Young. Look who's up there with them. And this is obviously from college production, not NFL. So this is just what they were in college. Right up there with them, Chop Robinson here when it comes to true pass rush, pass set win rate, and regular overall pass rush win rate. Then scroll down a little bit because there's another one here. I'm sure you can see this too. We got pass rush grades and pressure generated. We got pressure rate total on the left. We've got pass rush weighted grade on the right. We've got Bosa. We've got Chase Young, some of the best college players, Myles Garrett, another Bosa, Chop Robinson right up there with those five, and Latu as well. So, we're talking about
along with Braylon Trice from Washington and Jared Verse too.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut that off.
No. It's just important because they're all, and me personally, I've evaluated Jared Verse and Chop Robinson. Sure. I do like Verse a lot better. Verse is one of my favorite players I evaluated in this draft class. I think I'm a sucker for heavy hands, explosiveness, power moves.
You want a two-way player, right?
Yeah, like that. But again, man, I think Chop Robinson and Jared Verse would be fine in Shane Bowen's system. But I do think if you're identifying an edge rusher who specifically fits into the system that the Giants have, Chop Robinson is pretty, is especially with the roster they have now. after you brought in Brian Burns. Because it's not like if it is on rundowns and Chop Robinson's going up against an overpowering offensive tackle like a Jones, say from the Cleveland Browns, DeJuan Jones, you can say like, hey, man, maybe you sit this one out. You come in on third down, because you have two edge rushers out there. Brian Burns isn't great against the run by any means. He's another one kind of like Chop Robinson where you got to rely on your quickness to evade a clean blocking attempt. Kayvon Thibodeau right now, if Chop Robinson, this is a concern too. Kayvon Thibodeau right now is the one edge rusher who can actually set like a firm edge and be a sound run defender. And I wouldn't even consider Kayvon Thibodeau like a great run defender right now.
No. Yeah, it's interesting. The Giants have, and now we'll see. I was kind of thinking about like, is Azeez the worst of the group right now of Burns, Kayvon, and Azeez? Who would you say is the worst?
It's hard, man. Like, how many snaps have we seen of a healthy Azeez Ojulari out there playing the run? Like, remember he bulked up before, I think it was last season. He bulked up. We were all talking about how he bulked up. It might have been before the 2022 season. And even then, we still didn't really see him that much.
And then he had that calf injury that like killed him. That Bengals joint practice just could never come. They're like, it's only going to be a couple week injury. And I was like, damn it, I knew this is going to end up lingering and just ruin his whole year. He can't get any push off of it. Can't have a calf injury as a pass rusher. It's just not going to work. Like, think about that. Like, you need to explode off of your lower half. So now let's try to apply all this to the Giants because, I would love the luxury of having.
Before we do that, let me read this not so synopsis.
Yeah. Oh, we didn't even get a chance to do synopsis. Let's do a little synopsis action.
I already probably said a lot of the points, so I'll try to fly through it. Chop Robinson. Thanks, man. Chop Robinson is a twitchy pass rusher with rare sudden bursts and a rare ability to tightly bend the edge while keeping his chest small to avoid clean punches from offensive tackles when he is rushing high side. His 10-yard split was in the 97th percentile for edge rushers, to no one's surprise. Robinson puts immense weight on his ankle joints while still maintaining momentum and balance as he tightly corners around offensive linemen with an impressive ability to bend underneath contact and use his hands to enhance his leverage as a high side rusher. Robinson's current calling card is to rush high side, using his insane athletic traits to put stress on opposing offensive tackles. It's not a surprise that the Giants are interested in Robinson, who is tailor-made for Shane Bowen's defense that features a ton of wide nine rushes on passing down. Robinson is a nightmare to block from a wide angle. A combination of Robinson and Brian Burns would be a dangerous duo for opposing offensive tackles against the pass. Bowen uses a lot of simulated pressure that drops edges into coverage. Robinson does that well with a solid overall grasp in shallow zones. However, Robinson is still raw as a player. His ability to stay low and slant around blockers using his agility and short area quickness to disrupt rushing lanes is an asset. Still, his ability to stack and read is hindered by only average play strength and eyes that are also hurt due to poor length. Robinson is also not quite polished as a pass rusher. He flashes brilliant footwork when rushing high side with some speed to power plays, but he fails to have a consistent counterpunch when offensive tackles respond well to his first move. I get the appeal of Robinson, especially at his age. The concerns about his inability to consistently play the run at the NFL level aren't unfair, but there are just a few players with his type of pass rushing upside and lightning quickness. The NFL is predicating on pressuring the quarterback, and there are few pass rushers in the draft with his type of elite bend and quickness. His ceiling is very high, but his floor could be a short-armed situational pass rusher who needs to develop more moves.
Oh, Logan, that's a great synopsis right there. And I think that's exactly what he is. And I don't want to call him like a luxury for the Giants based on where their roster is at.
But it kind of is.
But it kind of is. Exactly. Like, there's still the chance that he becomes one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. I think he has that profile. He's one of the best athletes at his position ever with already an amazing burst off line of scrimmage. But sorry, go ahead.
Is he a luxury at 47?
Well, that's what it comes down to. So I think we can rule out 6. I don't think Chop Robinson is. We're going to.
No, it would be like a trade. It'd be like a trade down. Let's say to 11.
Well, we're going to talk about that in a second, the trade down scenario. But let's talk about 47 first, because 6 we're ruling out. 47 would be he's falling on the draft board, and let's just be honest. Like, I don't want to say he's the same prospect because he's not. I like him better than this player by a good amount. But Nolan Smith fell all the way to 32 in the draft and was also kind of undersized, edge with a lot of good tape. Now, I think he's a better prospect than Nolan Smith for a multitude of reasons, both production-wise and athletic-wise. And he's
one thing I wanted to bring up, Nolan Smith had injury issues in college.
True.
Chop Robinson had I don't know. I don't think it was ever disclosed what it was, but it was against, I believe, Ohio State this past year. He played 24 snaps, and then he suffered like a head. It was like kind of like a head-to-head collision. He fell down, and it was a little awkward. They bring the card out, and then he dressed for the Maryland game a couple weeks later, but didn't play, and then he returned against Michigan. So I don't know if there was a head injury there. I don't want to speculate on it, but it's just something to note and monitor, and I'm sure the doctors will check him out.
Yeah, that's fair. And obviously the Nolan Smith injury profile made him maybe fall a little bit. But I think part of it is just that he was in a lot of ways an undersized edge. That, it is in some ways a luxury when you take a 239-pound guy like Nolan Smith to be in your defense. Now, Robinson's bigger, and he has some moments against the run. Though I kind of felt like Nolan Smith was a better run defender. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's not important. But it's possible that Robinson could fall, maybe not 47, but into a range in the 30s where the Giants can consider it worth trading up. So I want to start with that. I don't want to say 47, but 47 is possible. Like, what's the dude from Penn State who fell to the Falcons 2 years ago who I liked a lot?
Arnold Ebiketie.
Now, he's probably a better prospect though than Ebiketie. Like,
Chop Robinson is much better than Ebiketie.
Yeah,
I liked Ebiketie
47, and we liked Ebiketie. This guy can't fall 47. It just doesn't make sense, not with that combine. So, and that athletic profile. So let's say, but he does fall based on what we said. So now you're trading up to get him in second round. That's my question for you. Is he somebody you're willing to part with future assets to move up for?
No, the Giants roster needs a lot.
I think that's the problem. Yeah, I think that's the problem right now. The Giants aren't in a position for this. If they're the Chiefs right now or whatever, that's different. Like, then you can maybe say, all right, we get this guy and he wins us 1 or 2 or 3 games next year with just a third down play that we have him in for. That's worth trading up for.
So now let's speculate on this. This is a realistic scenario. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a realistic scenario.
Calling for JJ.
Vikings come calling for JJ.
Or May.
They trade up to 6 or May. And the Giants, for whatever reason, don't like them. And then a lot of Giant fans will be like, but let's just say it happens and the Giants get a haul. They get 11. They get 23. And they get next year's 1.
Oh, next year's 1 too. That's so pretty sounding.
It could happen. Like, it might be a 2 or 3, but like, it's not.
If it's the
unrealistic.
1, it sounds so good to
especially
me.
for other teams.
It's like anything in life, Nick, where it's like, you know what else sounded good when we traded back to 20 and we got Kadarius Toney and Evan Neal, but then we lost Parsons and we lost Slater. So, like, was it ultimately that good to lose Micah Parsons? No. It always feels good at the time. Every time you trade back, it feels good. No matter what, a trade back's always going to sound and feel good on paper. But it doesn't always work out that way. But
if they didn't select Kadarius Toney and they selected Christian Darrisaw,
it would have been fire.
And then the next year, Garrett Wilson.
Oh, put Garrett Wilson and Christian Darrisaw on this roster right now, we might be headed to the playoffs.
Exactly. So it was more the people picking it that messed up rather than the process that they used to get there. But 11 and 20, you're looking at 23, Chop Robinson. I'm debating it, but there are also so many other players that I'm looking at and I'm like, oh, you're passing up on this. There's probably going to be a cornerback that I'm going to love at that area of the draft. Offensive line depth at that area of the draft.
Tackles left on the board.
Other edge rushers, right? So it's definitely a situation that I don't know if I don't know if the Giants are going to find themselves here, right?
Yeah.
But this is, I think, one of the reasons why they're looking into these players is if a trade down scenario. I don't think they're going to, I at least hope with the next guy we're going to talk about here in a little bit, that they're not going to be like, well, at 47, we're going to select it. Unless they're saying Chop Robinson falls at 47. That's what we're going to do. And of course, they're not being rigid about this. They're going to field their calls. Joe Shane is going to do his due diligence as a general manager, and he wants to cross all of his T's and dot all of his I's just in case there is a trade down scenario or if one of these guys do fall. And both of these players that we're talking about in this podcast, Chop Robinson and Trey Benson, I think fit what the Giants want to do as a football team.
What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeau next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it. You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE System yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE System technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE System.
Yeah, actually, Nick, we're going to probably talk about that prospect. I know we opened the show and said we might on this one. We're probably going to do another episode for that because there's good stuff in there, and I don't want to get it buried in here. But as far as what you're saying, I think in that scenario, let's say it's 11-23, and then I'll tackle some other scenarios because I think they're possible. If it's 11-23 in a future one from the Vikings, which again sounds so good on paper, I'm not willing to go chop at 11. I think it's way too luxurious. I know you might be saying, if you're Joe Shane, I evaluated this class and this dude has the best pass rushing upside by far in the class. I still don't love it at 11 because I have my own concerns about his size and his ability to hold up against the run and what kind of player it is.
I mean, he's not a top 11 player for me right now.
It can't be like I just never have a top 11 player be this size unless it's Von Miller.
And I'm never going to
be that type.
Of course, and I'm never going to deny an edge rusher either. But at the same time, there are other players at other positions that have more of a need for this roster that I'm going to like the same, if not more than Chop Robinson. So 23 is,
I would look
No,
at
11,
it and be like,
11.
no, but I'm saying 20. Like, I'm not even
Yeah.
considering it at 11. Like, that's not even on my mind, right? Like 23, I'm like, yeah, consider, but there's still going to be players. So it's even like a further down than that, in my opinion.
Well, there's an interesting thing. Well, let's start by saying this. 23, I'll start by just giving my take on 23. The Giants are on the board 11. They take something good, a receiver, a tackle, whatever it may be. They're on the board at 23 and Chop's there. I won't hate it if they take him. I'll see what they're doing. They're going for this crazy upside on pass rush. And now you have just like a wild third down package with Thibodeau. Like you just have so many horses to send in the pass.
Dexter Lawrence too.
Dexter Lawrence in the middle. Just you need to like you could win just with Kayvon, Burns, and Chop at that point on third downs, but you now also have Raw. And I also, like I said, I like some of the reps where I saw Chop as like the stand-up 3-tech and then just his ability to quickly make that maneuver inside and kind of like a basketball player almost.
We stress it all the time on the podcast, man, but I don't think we can stress it enough. This defense is going to look a lot different than Wink Martindale because it's not going to bring as much pressure and it's going to use so many twists. And if you had Brian Burns and Chop Robinson and Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence running those twists, you're talking about like good luck blocking those four. Put 6 in protection. They're still going to find a way to get to the quarterback because
that's going to appeal to Shane and Bowen and all these guys like and Dable. Like, so I won't hate it at 23. I'll be intrigued by it. I don't love it, but like you said, I'll probably look at it the same way you do, Nick, in the end. Like, there are other guys that I have ranked just as high, if not higher, and they're at positions of better need. So I kind of would have rather that. But at the same time, I'll understand what their process is. But also it opens up another scenario. Now, as far as who else would they trade down from 6? Maybe the Raiders, maybe some of those other teams, but none of those other teams are going to put them in a position to take to have a second first round pick. Though, let's say they do move down with a Broncos type or whatever it may be, one of those teams, Raiders, Nick, that will also give them the second round pick, their second round pick in this year's draft. That could be a spot where the Giants can now take Chop if he falls early second round, whatever that would be, 39, 40, 41 range. So that's something to consider if they trade down with the Raiders or a Broncos, if they're the ones who want to trade up for McCarthy or whoever the quarterback may be. So just something to think about. But the other thing is, if you get really creative, and I've always wanted to do this as a GM, this never happens, but it's so fun. You trade back, you take the Vikings haul, you get 11, 23 and a first, then you trade back again from 11, or you trade back again from 23. You start firing trade backs into the ether, collecting assets, and just feeling on paper like you just won the freaking World Cup and you just won the lottery, even though obviously, of course, on paper doesn't quite always translate to what actually happens. Because in your mind, it's like, we have 32 picks in the first 33. We can't lose. And it's like, wait a second, 31 of them are busts. It's the NFL, and you can't hit everything. And that's the further you get back out of this class overall, the harder it is to actually land just a quality NFL player, which goes to our 30,000-foot view thing here, Nick, which is always, you don't draft position. Don't tell us we need wide receiver round 1, OT round 2, or wide receiver round 1, quarterback round 2. You can't do it like that. You got to draft the player because half these guys don't work out. More than half these guys don't work out.
Yeah. But again, like when we say that on this podcast, and I hope our listeners know this, it's because we know this draft, we've studied this draft, and we know that there will be, if the Giants stay at 6, players of the wide receiver position who fit exactly what the Giants are looking for, i.e. Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors.
And to further your point, there will be guys at 23 that you said who fit what we need at corner, or fit what we need at tackle for our future, and things of that, maybe receiver if we didn't go receiver at 11. Like, that's the thing. Like, so it's like, at that point, it might be too much of a luxury pick, but it's interesting, and he's a really interesting prospect because you don't always see this kind of crazy athletic profile with high pass rush win rate, with high PFF pass rush grade. You take out the true pass rush stats, and with crazy, you can see it on tape, the get off, the burst. It's there. It's just a matter of how does it translate. And I will say that Ohio State game for me definitely stood out to me, Nick, just watching DeJuan Jones and Paris Johnson have their way with him. Because I'm like, again, I could watch Minnesota game tape and Indiana game tape all day, dude, but those Minnesota tackles and Indiana tackles aren't even sniffing an NFL practice squad. And that's just the reality of college to the NFL projection.
Do you know how many times throughout Chop Robinson's tape, man, I saw an offensive tackle try to do a more shallow set and then be like, shit, I just need to like bail and like just start running and like try to like meet him up before he nails my quarterback. Yeah. Like my first step was a mistake. Like you knew the offensive tackle, like just knew he's like, that was not right.
Yeah.
Dude, I saw that happen. And again, these are, offensive tackles, as we like to say on the podcast, whereas I like to say, they're probably going to be like accountants, right? Some of them.
Yes.
But I saw one like go into his vertical set and he's like, nah, vertical set, man. I need to get this guy. This guy's way too quick for me.
I saw an exact rep like the one you're talking about against DeJuan Jones, but then DeJuan Jones did what I projected him to do in the NFL. He recovered because he's 6'7" and he has that kind of length. And that's what I thought Evan Neal would be doing his entire career in the NFL. How is DeJuan Jones better than Evan Neal? But Evan Neal was the 7th overall pick, and DeJuan Jones falls to round 4, and they're both 6'7". DeJuan Jones is fatter than him and looks more out of shape than him. Like, what the hell is wrong with Evan Neal? How come he can't recover like that? Why can't I see Evan Neal have a rep like that where he loses off the line of scrimmage with the burst, but then he just recovers because he's 6'7", like Orlando Brown Jr. and like DeJuan Jones? Like, just don't get it right now with Evan Neal. I really don't.
I wonder if the injuries definitely play a part. I wonder if Evan Neal's, how long was his arms? Evan Neal had 34-inch arms. DeJuan Jones, I want to say, was, and I know we're just talking about inches here, but it is important. DeJuan Jones, oh my God, 36 3/8.
I know. How does the NFL let that dude fall to round 4?
Bro,
it made no sense.
He almost had 12-inch hands. That's insane.
Everything about him was good, besides he was a little overweight, and he had maybe
he was 374.
Yeah, he was very overweight.
And he showed up to the combine 374.
Terribly. Yeah.
Meaning he was probably like 385 or 390. And a lot of teams probably look at that. And again, like, the teams know more than we do. They interview the players. Yeah. Evan Neal, like, I know the whole hamburger comment definitely like makes a lot of Giant fans be like, yo, like, this guy. And I get that. I do. Mm-hmm. And who was it? I think it was John Schmelk said, like, he's not that type. I do. Right. I believe what John Schmelk said. I think this is a hardworking individual who really wants to be good at football, and he's just never been criticized before in his life. And right now, he is hearing it from the New York freaking media. Yeah. This is somebody from like some random lake in the middle of like rural Florida. He is not used to the New York media.
No, he's not, and he's always been the best high school player, the best college player. Like, he's always been the biggest, the strongest at his level, like dominating people. So he finally met his match, and so far it hasn't been great. And he's got and I agree with that. Like, there, you could see the clear difference between Eric Flowers and Evan Neal, and that's the player John Schmelk brought up. You know, he hinted at, because Flowers has similar. He wasn't hearing a lot of criticism, but he wasn't actually reacting in the right way. He wasn't working his ass off. He wasn't, like Schmelk said, in his iPad after a game, 3 hours rewatching plays, and after practice rewatching all the tape on his iPad. That wasn't what Flowers was doing with the Giants. Now, the problem is that doesn't guarantee that Evan Neal is just going to become a good player. Because some of this, we hope it's not the case, but some of this might be physical limitations, which I just don't get, though, because like, you watch these other 6'7" dudes and they recover and they figure it out. Like, even when they lose the rep, it's just Neal seems to just be like lost on some of these reps. So hopefully Carmen Bracillo can find a way to unlock this, because the talent is obviously there. And the best way for the Giants to reach their ceiling as a roster is not to redo this right tackle position and try to find someone to be their future fit. The best way to do it is to turn their 7th overall pick, who was supposed to be their future at right tackle, into their future at right tackle, because no one else on this roster, Illuminor included, has anywhere near the type of upside as Evan Neal. They don't.
You need to salvage that asset. You can't let that asset be expired, man. It would be terrible. But it's funny, because if the Giants did go with Chop Robinson, Dan, Evan Neal would have a lot of problems blocking him in training camp. It would not look good.
That would look so bad for Neal in practice. It would. That's the worst type of guy for him. That's like his worst nemesis type of matchup. It's just terrible for him, because you're going to win that every time with the first step, Chop. And then, maybe that might be like a
confidence killer. Bringing in Chop Robinson.
Right. The fact that he's already going to have to go against disease, that's not good for his confidence. We got to find a way to unlock this dude's confidence. Figure it out. We need this. We need this guy to get better. What is going on with him? Please, Evan Neal, if you're listening, and you're not, I know you're not, but just find a way to give us a good season. I just want like a good season out of you, and just make me confident in our future. So can you imagine if he has a great bounce back season, Nick, and we go into next offseason not needing a tackle at either side? Do you know how good we're going to feel about this roster, like, moving forward?
We've experienced it, though. Like, Andrew Thomas heading into the 2020 season, or the 2021 season. The second one. The 2021 season was, we were like, oh God, we saw some positive signs at the end of the 2020 season, but I feel like they were oversold. Really? Because if you watch like the Cardinals game, do you remember the Cardinals game where they just kept lining like these 6 techniques over the tight end, punching the tight end in the mouth, and just absolutely invading the pocket? And Daniel Jones had like one leg at the time. And then the Ravens game where Matt Parrott it was terrible.
Was such a painful game to watch, that Ravens game.
It was such a painful. But then the 2021 season rolled around, and it was pretty instant. I remember we got on the podcast as our post-game wrap-up, and we were like, yo, Andrew Thomas didn't look that bad. And it was like the entire season, we were like, yo, Andrew Thomas looked pretty damn good. And it just, by the end of the season, we're like, yo, we might have a top 5 tackle on our hands.
Yep.
If that can happen for Evan Neal, you're talking about 2 bookend young tackles who are under contract. Dude, that would be amazing.
It would be amazing for the Giants. And it's so funny you brought up bad memories of the Ravens and the Cardinals games from that. I think it was what, the 2021 year,
The 2020.
2020 year. Yeah, right. Second year of Jones. I think that was the year he got injured with it. Was that the season-ending neck? That was the neck year?
No, it was the hamstring. The season-ending neck year was 2021 against the Eagles.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
okay. It was the hamstring. You're right. It was that bad hamstring injury he had. And I just think about those two games, Nick. I just feel like over the last 10 years of watching Giants football, why are we the team? And this could be for other teams. I could be wrong. I don't cover all the other teams or follow them all completely the way I can follow the Giants. But how many games have we seen where you've known from the first quarter you're out of it because your offense is completely hopeless and helpless because of your offensive line? It's crazy. You know those games. We've seen them all, the Eli years and some of the Jones years, where it's just like your O-line is just completely helpless from the first snap, and now you have no way to scheme around this. There's no way to even call an offense. Like, every snap, they're in the backfield. They're overwhelming you. It's just like, it's crazy. Like, it's just nuts. As John Mara said, it's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous that we're going on year 11 without an O-line, but
it's sad. It's sad.
Like,
the Giants had to rely on these wins where their defense forced like 4 turnovers against Jalen Hurts, or came out with something that Russ Wilson never saw against Seattle, or faced Brandon Allen with the Cincinnati Bengals, and they relied on like or they had a special teams touchdown and they scored against them. So they're already in the hole because their offense can't do shit. Just like crazy stuff. Like that Seattle game, people kind of forget. Colt McCoy was the quarterback of that.
I know.
Colt McCoy is an underdog right now, killing it. I think is where he's been, man. And you know what? That was a good game plan, and Colt McCoy was able to keep the offense on schedule. But it was Patrick Graham that beat Russell Wilson, and it was also kind of before I think we recognized that there were some issues with Russell Wilson. That was back when we thought like Russell Wilson was like the superstar, and he wasn't. He was at the time, but if you drop 8 and you take away the outside the numbers throws and force him to throw over the middle of the field, there are some problems.
He's kind of done as a quarterback now based on what you just said, that exposed way to play him. That concerns me for quarterbacks in this draft class who don't use the middle of the field, like Jaden Daniels and like Michael Penix. Does that mean they can't eventually use the middle of the field, Penix and Daniels? No, they could eventually be good in the middle of the field, but they don't see it right now that well, and they don't use it right now that well. So it's a projection at best that they could start using the middle of the field.
I'm about to finalize my report on JJ McCarthy. That dude uses the middle of the field.
He uses the middle of the field. It's one of the best traits about him. He's really good in the middle of the field.
And I have my reservations about JJ particularly, and I would love to get like Sal and Monty's take on this, because I know that they do great work and they like JJ McCarthy. And I like JJ McCarthy a lot more, and we'll get into his evaluation here probably later in the week. I liked him a lot more than I thought I was going to. But man, I have some reservations about his deep ball. I think there are times where he's throwing There are times where he's throwing over the middle of the field where he just doesn't put touch on it. Like it's almost it's just zip all the time. Yep. He's thrown multiple interceptions where it was like, dude, you have the guy open. It's a good throw, but it's a throw you can make. But he just doesn't put touch on it. A linebacker always just jumped up and intercepts it. And it's like, oh man, like JJ, you're better than this, bro. I have like one more game to watch, and then I'm gonna write up the evaluation and we'll bang that out. I'm excited for that podcast though. And then it's on to Drake May, baby.
Yeah, we're going to do some quarterbacks. We're going to start that just as a little bit of a teaser coming up, but we're going to start to do some quarterbacks here. We're going to do McCarthy, May, Penix. Those are going to be the 3 we start with, I believe, is what we decided on. We're not going to do Caleb Williams because there's just no point. No. Sadly, I would love to do his evaluation. It'd be so fun to talk Caleb with you, but this is not a good use of our time. And then Daniels, we are going to get to if we have time, but I don't foresee the Giants taking Daniels. They've had one visit with him.
And we have talked a lot about Jaden Daniels through the Malik Neighbors podcast, and we kind of just mentioned him a lot because I think it is important, and he's a lightning rod, very exciting. But for everything that you just brought up, like he doesn't really target the middle of the field. He doesn't really have that great of an arm for a quarterback who's going to be selected.
Overrated arm.
And the hits that he takes that's something that really gives, like, and again, people are like,
when he breaks pocket, he just runs. He doesn't keep his eyes downfield.
JJ keeps his eyes downfield.
Oh yeah,
definitely
really well.
Man.
Really another good thing. He's great at throwing on the run, but really only to his right. It's a big problem. He has 0 throws basically on tape, rolling to his left and throwing, and he's not really good at all throwing to his left, in my opinion. He's occasionally okay.
I have some plays down in my notes.
He has good moments for sure. Yeah. And the other thing with JJ is, which no one talks about, and we'll get to this in the evaluation. I don't want to spoil too much. It's just, everybody talks about the Drake May misses on tape. JJ has some overstride throws from big pockets that are just 100%. Bad misses. The Bama miss on that like 15-yard out that he just sails like clean pocket. Like that's like people are killing Drake May for that type of stuff. And guess who else has that? Like I see that Jaden Daniels, like all these quarterbacks miss throws. Everyone acts like it's just like Drake May is missing so many throws. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
You watch
he
these
had
other
this-
guys.
He had
People miss throws.
he had an interception against Maryland on
JJ,
what
yeah.
I was just talking about with the lack of touch. And then he had this wide open post. It was a beautifully
Oh, I
designed
know
play
exactly
by the
what
offense.
you're talking about.
And he threw it to the inside and
Hung it
behind.
up there.
And it's just like,
That was
oh,
such
man,
a bad throw from a clean pocket
from
too.
a clean pocket. Yeah.
I
So
put that one on Twitter. That
stuff
was
like that makes me just like
scared.
It's tough to like be like, yeah, the 6th pick. You definitely, you know what I mean?
And yet, if you get him like in the perfect Shanahan system, it's just the thing is like this guy just doesn't. We'll talk. I don't want to spoil too much, but Dable just doesn't.
I'll just say this, man. I like him better than I thought I would. Definitely.
Okay, that's good. And I didn't know what I was going to feel on him. I don't want to touch too much. We're already giving away too much. This is not the JJ McCarthy podcast. We need to keep people wanting to come back for that. So let's wrap up there. That's it for the Big Blue Banter podcast today. We're talking Chop Robinson, talk some scenarios out with him. We gave away a little too much information on how we feel about JJ, but there's more. There's a lot more. And Nick's got tape. We're going to roll into all of it. And I got some tape we can throw up too. So we'll do all that. But thank you again for listening to Big Blue Banter podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode and the Matt Wallman episode and the John Schmelk episode. If you have enjoyed these and you're new to the page, please subscribe. We need your help. Please hit the like button on this video. There's 2 things we're going to ask every time. It's subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and like. And if you are listening to the podcast, please make sure you download. Don't just hit play, and set us up for subscribe on the podcast as well. It's 4 things. They're about a click, half a second to 2 seconds per click. Now it's a total of 6 seconds from you for episode. We'll ask for those 6 seconds, please, to help us. And then we're just going to keep delivering this content. So it's a pretty good deal, I think. Hopefully you agree. Anyway, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.